Ladies and gentlemen, today we have one simple mission. Build the most spectacular looking gaming PC that we possibly can. And in order to do this, we've actually got a brand new chassis that has launched quite literally today, if you're watching this when this video comes out. This is the HAVN HS420. And as you can see, this is an absolutely gorgeous looking chassis. It comes in both black and white, and interestingly, you can get it with a PCI Generation 5 riser cable, which isn't actually something I've seen from a case manufacturer yet. There may be some that exist, but this is the first one certainly that I've tested or we've tested on this channel. So today we're going to grab an RTX 4080 Super, a brand new X870 motherboard, and then a Ryzen 9950X CPU, and we're going to be building something as spectacular as possible. I'm going to walk you through everything that you need to know, how to build it, and then of course show you those all-important gameplay benchmark numbers so you can see exactly how this thing performs. I'm extremely excited to get started, so all that's left to say is a massive thank you to HAVN for proudly sponsoring this video. So let's first clear this table of ridiculously high-end components, and then we can actually... This is going to get heavy. Whose idea was this to have all of the cases on the desk at the same time? I mean, actually, there are a total of 4 different versions, so that would probably collapse the desk with the weight. So we're not doing that, but fortunately, it's very easy to remember because you've got this black and white version. It's mainly white, but I personally like that you have some black elements because it makes it a lot easier to tie in when you're buying your components, because buying all white components is actually pretty difficult. You always find that there are bits of black on the PCB or on your graphics card or like fan headers or something. So this just makes it like tie in a little bit easier. It's more seamless. Or obviously you can go for the all black version, but you've probably noticed it already, but in case you haven't, the differences between these two, other than the color, are that this does actually come with a vertical GPU mounting kit. And it obviously does cost a bit of a premium because you're getting more stuff, but PCI riser cables are expensive, and this is actually the first chassis I've personally seen. I don't know if there are some others out there, maybe let me know down in the comment section below, but certainly at the time of filming, this is the first one I've seen that comes with a PCI Generation 5 16X riser, which is fantastic because we're just about to enter the world of like new CPUs and new graphics cards and things. So if you are going down this route and you're buying like a more premium case and it comes with PCI Generation 4, then suddenly your whole plan is scarpered a little bit. So I like that they are pretty forward thinking with this. It's coming out at the right time. But if you wanted to go for a more normal setup, then obviously you can save yourself the money and just buy the standard version. But as you can see, it definitely does a few things differently. But the secret weapon really of this is pretty much all about this bottom ventilation. So you'll populate this with fans and then you'll get decent ventilation to your GPU. And if you want to populate something here, then that's optional. And I like the fact that it's going to look good regardless of whether you want to put fans here, because this is one of the issues with some of the other cases on the market today. You will find that you're kind of forced to buying loads of fans, which if you want to do that, you know, it's great, but I like the flexibility of having these solid bits if you don't want to go down that route. Right, this case can go now. Who needs to go to the gym, eh, when you can just lift PC cases? I mean, look at those. Not bad, eh? Anyway, should we press on to the important bit and actually see what this is all about? And I know that they do have an easy mechanism to actually take this curved glass out. I mean, the top comes off. Oh, that's very satisfying. It's got a little strap here as well. Then you have some transit screws that I believe you just take off once, and then if you don't want to put these back, that's fine, but obviously you don't want to mess around with glass like this when you're actually transporting it, so it makes sense. Oh, I've also got some tape to remove. And then I need to watch my hands and fingers, and I grip here when removing the panel. Does this now come off? Yes, it does. It's on these kind of soft rails, and then the whole thing just lifts off like that. So that was very easy, and you can see what I mean actually about the glass look. Good angle on that, very tight. Let's not go there. Will the whole thing go back on easy though? There's actually like these, as I say, like these grooves, these rails that it fits into. So you just line this up, the wheels go into the groove, the whole thing just sits into position, and then it rocks back into place. That's what we need. Congratulations, HAVN, you've done it. The irony, of course, is that we then need to remove it again. I promise I'm not doing that one just for show. How else are we going to build a PC, huh? And then we can actually take a close look inside. And actually, another advantage of having the glass that removes like that is that it's just easier to access everything, especially if you're going to be putting fans and things here. It feels very open now. I mean, I guess in theory you could use it like this, but why would you want to? And oh, actually, that's unusual. Haven't seen these before. These cable tidy grommets, like a kind of like rubber bits that just bend out the way. So if you put cables through with a lot of force, you don't like get the whole rubber grommet go through as well. That's annoying. Hopefully this covers them up as well as they need to, but those certainly look good. Again, like another premium feature, this is the sort of thing you're going to be paying for. When we spin this around to the other side, more screws. And then I think the whole thing should just remove completely toollessly, actually. Well, once you've removed the initial screws again. And then you've got this mesh structure on the side as well. But let us remove our large accessory box. This is our vertical GPU kit. Let's have a look what's inside. Oh, that's not what I expected, because most of it's actually in the case itself. That is glass. I think this is actually for directing airflow, but I could be wrong. Let's find out as we go along. I suppose I should say as well, by the way, that you do get a very clear and easy to use user guide in a bunch of languages with very easy to see diagrams and things that will explain everything for you. And then in this Start Here box, we have our proper accessory kit. And then here we have everything that we're going to need, even a glovelet for ESD, and mainly really so you can touch components without getting them like oily. Told you it was premium. But if you have a closer look at this, you can actually see that the power supply is going to go down here. So whilst the case is slightly wider than your standard footprint, it's not by much compared to, like, I don't know, like 6500X or something like that. There's quite a big difference, and this could be the difference between you having speakers on your desk and not. But then you've also got ample cable management as well. We have this little fan hub here as well, which is a nice little smart feature. I would probably recommend that if you're going to fit loads and loads of fans in here, that you do go for a fan ecosystem that daisy chains together and you don't have to have all of these cables, but that will definitely make your life easier. But you do have all of these cable management channels. I'm trying to think of interesting adjectives to describe fan channels, but other than good, tidy, clean, I'm struggling a little bit. We also have room for storage in this little channel here. It's not just like a single plate. You can physically fit drives and things in here, which is definitely a nice touch, because on the face of it, it doesn't really look like you can do much with this, but there's actually loads of things you can do, because if you wanted to use it as like a fan mount, you can do that. Water cooling, radiators, you can actually fit a 420 at the top, at the side, or at the bottom, which is smart, so this is going to be great for custom water cooling. They're also touting that you could put a VESA compatible screen here, so if you wanted to have like a huge display inside your chassis, you could do that. But again, the thing I like is that whilst you are obviously going to need to add fans, you're going to need to add fans for ventilation. I like the fact that this still looks fantastic, even if you don't put any fans in there. Fantastic, but without the fans, so it's just tastic. But anyway, as I was going to say, that would usually be the end, but there's actually this little bracket here that will remove as well. Once again, a little transit bolt. Well, I say transit bolt, it's just a tiny little screw. But once you've done that, the whole thing just completely toollessly removes. Look, you have a dust filter down the bottom. And the reason that you have the filter at the bottom, not the top, is because you're probably going to use this as an intake and this as an exhaust. It's not really something I've seen before, actually, but it does make a whole bunch of sense, really. I don't think you actually need to use it if you're going to go for this vertical GPU orientation, but I think it will still probably look slightly better if you do populate it. And it's still more airflow, so the more the better, right? But anyway, that is our HAVN chassis. I now think it's time to actually get our build on. I'm going to start with, I don't necessarily want to say disappointment, because I'm glad we've got new boards, because it gives manufacturers even more time to improve things. But this is X870, which may as well just be called B650E with USB 4. Maybe slightly better memory overclocking. There's not really that much drastic that's changed, other than the fact that obviously it does bring in new designs, and obviously motherboard manufacturers can add new stuff to their boards. But in terms of bandwidth and things, there's not masses of differences. But I would probably recommend most people do actually look at X870. Before, 670 was pointless, because you'd either go for B650E or 670E, whereas now it's kind of like, I don't know, there's not that much reason necessarily to go for X870E unless you need all of these crazy features, because this pretty much has everything that you need. So this is the ROG Strix X870 -A. I don't know what the names mean, I'll be honest. I've never managed to work it out. If you know what those little letters after the name means, please tell me. I don't know if it's consistent. Let me know anyway. But yes, very large heatsink as well, because if you do want to go for a Gen 5 SSD, they do produce a lot of heat. This has pretty decent I/O, loads of USB. There's our USB 4, which is quite nice. How many people are actually going to be using this though? Probably not many, but it's good to be future-proof, especially on a board that has a socket that's obviously very future-proof itself. Intel. And I mean, I gotta say, cynicism aside, just look at this motherboard. That is a beauty. I mean, do you see what I mean as well about all of these black elements, even on a white board? I think it is going to tie in a lot nicer if you have that on the chassis. So again, glad that they've gone down that route. Also good to see that you have 2 USB 3 headers as well, because there are cases that will come with 4 USBs, and without having to resort to splitters and reducing bandwidth and things, you need a new motherboard to be able to achieve that, which is great. And then it certainly looks as if you have loads of slots for PCIe SSD, SSDs. And indeed, removing this does reveal a total of 3 slots here actually, plus this massive one that you have at the top. It's kind of ridiculous actually, the difference in heatsink size. Is this toolless? It says push, so yes, look at that. They are taking PCIe Gen 5 seriously, not only because you have that, but because this slot as well is also Gen 5 4X, which is quite cool. These lower ones are Gen 4, but whilst Gen 5 SSDs aren't really that important at the time of filming, Gen 5 slots for your graphics definitely are, because you're going to want this again to last for a long time, and if rumors are to be believed, it looks like we're going to see Gen 5 on Nvidia's new cards. Whether it's going to be all of them or just some of them, we don't know, but it would be very annoying to invest in like all of this ecosystem and then not be able to upgrade your graphics card without swapping out the board. So if you are going for something high end, I would strongly consider going for Gen 5 just to give you that future support. And actually, even if you're going for a more budget-friendly rig, bear in mind that if you're going to swap out your GPU in like 4 years' time, it's still going to be something to be quite useful. I wouldn't pay like a crazy amount of money for it, but with more and more boards coming out with this functionality, hopefully the price will start to come down. And actually, whilst we're here, we may as well populate our SSD. We're going for a 990 Pro because I only have one Gen 5 SSD and that has a massive loud fan on it and it was stupid. If you want to learn more about the most ridiculous SSD that I don't recommend, you can find that video in the top right-hand corner of your screen. But no, instead we're going for Gen 4 with this 990 Pro. There's even a little thermal padlet on the back of it. That's quite cute. Then that drops down. Remove the cover on the underside and then just slot this in completely toollessly. We're a bit out of shape, a bit out of order today though, aren't we? But I don't know what's going on. My brain's all over the place. And that's also what you might be thinking when I present you with the CPU of choice. This is the 9950X, and to be honest, there are very few people at the time of filming, emphasis on that I would actually recommend buying this for, because most people will probably be happy with the performance of the 7950X, which is still already loads of performance, because obviously it's a 16-core part. But of course, the price of this will come down, and if we are going to be doing a ridiculously high-end build, then why not go for the highest-end CPU you can get? I mean, yes, obviously X3D is still a little bit faster, and if you're watching this in a couple of months' time, there might be a replacement. Then yes, obviously I would recommend gamers go for that. But if we're going to properly put this chassis through its paces and build something truly ultimate, I think we need to go for the 9950X. So let's drop that into position and save this for ROM. And because actually that we are going for an X870 board, as I say, one of the improvements to this is supposedly better support for faster memory. So what we've got here is a white kit of Klevv. This is running at 7200 megatransfers a second. It's 48 gig, but it does actually come with an AMD Expo profile. So this should be quite literally the ticket to even better performance and certainly faster and lower latency RAM. I mean, CL34 actually on a kit this fast is not bad. And I mean, look at it. It certainly is a very attractive kit of memory, isn't it? But this should just drop down into position in slots 2 and 4, and then it'll end up like that. And then of course, don't forget that before we actually put this inside our chassis, it's always worth actually checking the cooler mounting system just to see if this is going to be easier to do now. So actually, I should show you what it is. This is the IQ-Link H150i LCD, and what I would probably suggest if I was doing this again would just be to get matching fans with this, use the IQ-Link system, and everything will be a lot easier. But because I don't have these fans in 140s, as I say, I'm making life difficult. We're going to mix and match. But let's open this up and see what the mount is like. With this cooler, it looks to be very straightforward. Just remove the default AM5 mounting hardware, and then with the AMD screws that you get in the box, literally just peg these into your board. And then once your cooler is mounted inside your chassis, it should literally just place down on top like that before screwing down. But as I've used this before, obviously I will have to add some new thermal compound to bridge the gap between the IHS and the CPU to stop it overheating. And then now that we've done that, we're going to very gently move everything over to one side, not off the table. I've definitely never done that before. And then I think it's going to be far easier if we actually remove this PCIe riser, just so we can drop our motherboard into place. So it should just be, is that one screw from behind? I listen to myself sometimes and I am ashamed. And anyway, it's 3 screws from behind, so get your mind out the gutter. And then this should just drop down into position. All the standoffs are of course pre-done for you. But let's get this screwed down. But let's press on now and actually get our CPU cooler installed. It's just 2 screws, and there is actually like a rubber dampener underneath as well that will obviously stop the, or at least reduce the vibrations that you might get from any fans. If you go for cheaper ones, decent ones these days don't have that problem. We do have this little fan bracketlet that removes and I imagine drops in very easily. Once again, it's got this rail system that kind of curves round, so it's very easy, very straightforward. But obviously this bracket needs to just sit on top of this cooler, screw down into position, and then this whole thing should catch in those grooves again Wow. And there's just 2 screws to fit that back down. That was probably the easiest radiator install I've ever done. And half of that is the case, half of that is the fact that the Corsair fans are pre-attached. Lovely stuff. Then I'll apply some thermal compound to our CPU, grab our pump head, and then this should just drop down into position, and then fit into place with the thumb screws. Before we start getting things really messy with fan cables though, let's see if we can actually plug in our existing connections. So I've run the cables through for the radiator. Because this is IQ Link, it's literally just going to be this into the controller that's here. I mean, we can actually kind of test fit this now. Is there going to be somewhere for this to go? Yes, we can kind of just park it down here. I mean, I think that's what this is designed for, but to be fair, a little bit of feedback, it would be nicer if that was actually metallic, because then magnetic boxes would stick down there without the need for sticky tape. But you get this with most things anyway, so it's not really a problem. So let's peel that off and then stick this down, maybe right in the middle. As I'm feeding these cables through, I must admit I am starting to appreciate the ease of cable management as well, because there are a lot of clear channels to use. It's nice that they label them for you, but obviously you can use them for whatever you want. So here we've got our controller and then all of the cables going up to the radiator, but then everything so far is nice and neat and tidy. But because we're going for a power supply with some custom, forget about the bag, some custom cables, this is definitely going to be a challenge for this. So whether we can actually get this neat, I'm not entirely sure, but we're certainly going to give it a good go. And as you'd expect, everything has been pretty straightforward and easy to connect. We've got all of our USBs up here. There's also ample room to get underneath the radiator if you're not doing push-pull as well, so you don't necessarily have to like pre-wire all of these before you put the rad in, which is good. You can access your CPU power at the top, and then down the bottom everything is pretty much as you'd expect. But obviously if you are going to be using a PCIe riser cable and then go for the vertical GPU mount, make sure all of this stuff is fully connected before you get the GPU in, because once you've done that, it's going to be nigh on impossible to actually unplug or reconnect things, so bear this in mind. And then I must admit, this is the bit that I've not really been looking forward to, because it's now time to actually mount the fans. And these are absolutely fine for case fans. I don't really have like a big opinion about them one way or the other. It's just when you use a large volume of addressable RGB fans, it just gets to be a tangled mess, as I say. But these happens to be the only 140s that I have in white that use addressable RGB. So we're gonna go with these, the M25s from Fantex. They're not like massively expensive, which obviously when you like buy loads of them, you know, that is a good thing. But you can fit 140s and 120s in most spaces around the case, but it doesn't look as if you can put 120s down here. I mean, you can underneath, but if you're gonna go for this approach, then you'd wanna put 140s because it fills the whole ring and that doesn't look like there's mounting for 120s. So bear that in mind, but otherwise, I don't know, the case is your oyster when it comes to fans. Oh, right, okay, I get it now, I understand. These little plates here, these are to make your fans look better if you're using 120s, because they convert a 120 into like 140 space essentially. That actually makes sense and why I was a little bit confused at the start of this, because if you are using a 140, then obviously it populates the full spot, whereas normally you have that kind of horrible mesh thing at the back, don't you? That makes mounting different sizes of fans very easy, but it's not the most attractive thing here. So this is why you have these like adapter brackets that you get as standard, because the alternative would be just to only let you fit 140s, and they've decided that that wouldn't be good, so you have the adapter bracket. Right, there you are, look, comes out. You will need to swap the screws for the ones that come with your fans now, because they're slightly longer. But I tell you what though, the end result definitely does stand out and look quite different, because you don't have that horrible mesh. It just looks better. In order to get to this bottom fan, it looks as if it's just gonna be one screw, and then this, yeah, literally just lifts out like that. So that is very easy and straightforward, which is good. Then we can remove this. Then we can get our lower fan connected, and obviously do bear in mind that you're going to see both sides of the fan, so not only will the label want to be the right way up, but you should consider choosing a fan that looks good from both sides, like a dual loop or something like that. This is okay, but if you didn't want to see this logo, then buy a sticker. So far, so good. Now we just need to actually get our fans installed on our lower plate. And we grab these long screws that do come in the GPU kit, and then we can secure these down. So I'm going to feed this through now, for which there is a hole. Then this whole unit should pick up, and then just slot back into position, and then screw it back down into place. And then actually our rig is really starting to get complete now. It doesn't look as bad as I thought it was going to with these extra cables. It kind of depends on the angle that you're looking at it from. Top down, you can see it, but actually most of the time they're completely invisible, which is nice. It clearly works having all of that space underneath, but do be advised that if you do have white cables that we do have here, then the black dust filter is going to show them up, just as an FYI. Think carefully about the fans you're going to choose for this chassis is all I'll say. There is a glass piece that we showed you earlier that's going to help to direct this airflow exactly where it needs to go and sort of stop like patches can, I don't want to say recirculating, but it just takes the air to the graphics card essentially, rather than letting it go places it doesn't need to. So it's a nice touch, but actually, I think it's now time for a power supply. Oh, and as we showed you earlier, I am using my bundle of cables, my bundle of joy. These are from Corsair. They're the Type 4 extension kit. I'll leave everything, by the way, linked with my affiliate links listed down below. If you wanted to go for a cheaper option, you could just use the stock cables that come with this. This is the RM850. 850 is pretty much all you need, but if you wanted to go for 1,000 or 1,200 to cover yourself, high-end rig, I get it. Makes perfect sense. But this one actually comes with white cables inside the box, which is quite nice, but they're not as high quality as the separate ones. Oh, but if we grab our modular power supply, turn it round so we can actually get to the PSU chamber. Again, remember, this is kind of hybrid dual single chamber where this will go down the bottom. Started routing loads of cables through already. It would help if I had it the right way round. So let's just screw this down. The issue then becomes cabling, doesn't it? And there's definitely a lot of room, but I've already got quite a lot of stuff plugged in. And through the power of Editor Carl's editing, I have actually got everything as tidy as, I don't want to say as I can, but as I would reasonably expect to do so. For the most part, cable management is very good because there are loads of different places you can stuff cables. I like the fact that you've got this bit down the bottom as well for thicker cables that you can kind of stuff. The only criticism and complaint I would have is that I would prefer to have actual larger channels, because all the time you're using more normal equipment, it's fine. But as I kind of predicted, as soon as you go to custom cables where they're a bit thicker, that's when you start to run into problems. And normally this wouldn't be like a massive complaint, and to be fair, it's not really. But obviously this is a premium chassis, so I would say it's quite likely that the people buying this are going to go for third-party cables and things. So if you just made the channels slightly bigger, you will be able to stuff them in a bit more. You can see what I mean, where the CPU cables do fit, but then this bit here just becomes a bit of a blubbly mess. But of course, with those cables now connected, it means we can move on to our final component, and I suppose two things-ish, because first things first, we do actually need to get our PCIe riser back installed, and I'm hoping this is pretty straightforward. It came out, so it should go back in. We just want to line this up, screw it back into position, and then we can grab our PCI Gen 5 cable and then push that into our slot. It's just probably the most nerve-wracking bit of the whole video, the entirely black graphics card. Either this is going to work and it's going to look fantastic, or it's going to go and look a bit silly. So let's now, I was going to say drop this down into place. We need to remove the screws, don't we? And actually that is a potential flaw, I imagine. Yes. How can you screw this down if you have a long screwdriver? Oh, that's better. I mean, still a little bit annoying, but you are limited in space, I get that. So you just want to take 3 out for this GPU, and then moment of truth, is this going to work? Oh, there's a cover on it. That's why. Well, that went in straight away immediately. And actually, I would say that does work. Personally speaking, if you want to go for a white and black build, I think that looks good. Whether it looks as good as a white GPU, well, that's down to personal preference, but it certainly doesn't look bad. And the other good thing about this as well is that you can actually adjust the position of the card really easily. I mean, look, that's completely toolless. You just have to undo a screw slightly. So, okay, you need a screwdriver, but then you can adjust it, and that's very straightforward. So a card like this, I'd probably want to bring it out a little bit more to allow the air to go through to the other side. Whereas if you've got something a bit more traditional, then you could sort of butt this right up against it potentially. It's worth experimenting because you get more airflow here, and if it doesn't need to go around the back, it doesn't matter so much. But obviously do bear in mind the other components on your board as well. So they've given you loads of room, so even if you do bring it out all the way, it's not close to the glass. I'll tidy everything up before we get the beauty shots, but how about that? I think that really works. You know, white GPU probably looks a little bit better, but I think this is awesome. I do like this cooler, and once you turn it on, you kind of forget about the shortcomings. And I haven't tested this, so I could look like a little bit of a numpty. I think this is still gonna work absolutely fine, and then push it back into place. So yes, obviously you can see these cables. That is the downside of a more open air approach, but most people aren't gonna see that, so it doesn't really matter. But again, bear this in mind if you're gonna go for white cables. Kind of makes sense until you think about this, so just plan properly. But as we only have 7 minutes 20 left on these SSDs for recording, let's actually get this turned on, shall we? We'll grab ourselves a keyboard, mouse, and of course the PC Centric mouse mat, still available at pccentric.store. They are selling, and when we run out, that'll be it. But it is taking longer to run out than I thought. But let's not get ourselves bogged down with who's not buying whose mouse mats, and actually turn this on. Oh, whoa, that sounds bad. No, bad, 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 bad. Right, I think that was an easy fix. It was an easy fix. Let's go again. There we are, that's better. And look at it come alive. I mean, obviously, if you are going to put extra fans on the side, this would probably help to complete the look. But there's definitely a lot of RGB at the moment, and it's still very tasteful because it's shouting at you, but I wouldn't say it's screaming. 2 minutes, 9 seconds on the camera. It's a race. What'll run out first? My PC Centric to live or the cameras? Yes! We did it, son! Other than the fact that we still need to install the glass, but don't worry about that. And ladies and gentlemen, through the power of going into his chair way too quick, and actually a good weekend, that's why I'm in a fresh t-shirt and I smell lovely today. Now, not really too much to report other than the fact that it obviously was a little bit more complicated once you put the glass in, trying to line up the graphics card, but I was making my life much more difficult by doing it in the wrong order. If you had actually put the glass on the fans first, then it would have obviously been a lot more straightforward. You wouldn't have to like take things out. But do be aware that it does get a little bit more fiddly when you're mucking about with the vertical GPU stuff. But obviously once you've done it once, you're set, you're ready to go. So what we're going to do is jump into some games, starting with some Starfield. And as you can clearly see, things are definitely kicking off here at the moment. So let's plow our way through and actually talk about what's going on. Well, this is running at the ultra quality preset. We're running this at 4K, but DLSS is set to performance. And I've spoken about this before many times. Do use the upscaling. The frame generation is a little bit hit and miss because it affects the latency, whereas especially on a 27-inch 4K monitor, DLSS performance is fantastic, but obviously the bigger the screen you go and the more power you have, it does make sense to obviously turn those settings up. But at the moment we're getting around about 115 FPS or so, which is a really great way to play. I mean, I don't know how many people are still playing Starfield. I know it's not the hit that they wanted, and that obviously Skyrim is still very much like the fan favorite. But from what I have played, I've enjoyed it. It's just not necessarily my sort of game. It's a little bit too open. Seems like we've got a slight bug here. Maybe it's just doing some workouts. But around about 100 FPS at ultra settings is not too bad. And actually, just out of interest, let's run this at 1440p. And then you can see that the frame rate has increased slightly, but certainly nothing that dramatically. And I would say that this is probably likely to be a little bit of CPU bottlenecking. This is obviously a very high-end chip, but as we know, ragdoll physics exist. As we know, the X3D is going to give you better performance in certain titles, and this is one of those games where it may well just be that we are on the limit, which is another reason why in this day and age I quite like to have a high-resolution monitor, because it gives you that flexibility. As long as it can hit a high frame rate, you don't necessarily have to choose between like visual fidelity and obviously having a high frame rate. You can use the DLSS or the FSR or whatever to sort of adjust accordingly, and it works quite well in Fairlight. That's an audio editor in Starfield. But ladies and gentlemen, I now think it's time to up the ante even more, because what we have here is a game that I find doesn't always run that well. This is some Hogwarts Legacy, and we've got this running with ray tracing. So it's definitely a very intense title, no doubt about it. This isn't Hogsmeade, so it's very intense on the CPU as well. But if you look at that frame time graph, we're not really getting any signs of stutter or anything. Like, it's definitely not like still like the most perfect game in the world, but I'm really impressed actually. This is running at ultra with ultra ray tracing, and we do have our DLSS set to performance with the resolution outputting at 4K. And I'll just double check for you, but I think frame gen is actually off as well. Yep, frame generation is off. So if you wanted to turn this on, obviously it would increase your frame rate even further, but it would come at a slight latency penalty, but it still feels nice and smooth. So not really a big issue there. This is a 180 Hz monitor. If you want to learn more about it, link to that, by the way, is down below. But we're now getting about 160, 165 FPS. So yeah, there's no doubt about it. This system can play Hogwarts Legacy really well, and actually it's handling this CPU demanding area of the game quite well. In terms of temperatures as well, we're currently hitting around about 52 degrees on a 4080 Super. If you want to hear what it sounds like, but very quiet, to be honest. I've obviously tuned this down. This is a silent room, and you can hear it, but it's just like a pitch that's very easy to ignore. And I think most of it is actually coming up top from the CPU cooler, because obviously this is a high wattage CPU, whereas if you were to go for like a 7800X3D, 9800X3D, or I guess the new Intel chips, though we haven't tested those yet, then in theory, I guess you get even less noise, right? Because it's not using as much wattage. But that's the problem with going for a very high-end CPU that has loads of cores and things. Obviously it does use more power and can generate more noise. But This is still a ridiculously quiet system, make no mistake about it. I'm being very nitpicky. But of course, I don't think we could seriously talk about ray tracing without talking about the star of the show. And some people have said, oh, this game's old now. But to be fair, even I haven't still played Phantom Liberty. I need to sit down with it properly and finish it off, if you like. But yes, this is currently running around about 68 FPS, once again running DLSS performance. But ray tracing is set to ultra and frame gen is currently off. Obviously, you're going to get a bit of variance depending on where you are in the title. But it's an absolutely fantastic looking game. And if you haven't obviously played Cyberpunk, you're upgrading to like a new PC or something, it's definitely still worth grabbing because it does look fantastic. And these, I was going to say new 40 Gen series cards, obviously they're quite old at this point. We're actually rumoured to be getting the 5090 maybe at like CES, something like that. So whether you'd want to go out and buy like a really high-end GPU today, 4080, 4090, personally I wouldn't, but maybe like 4070 and below maybe, but then there are rumours there might be a 5070. It's kind of that like do or don't sort of time frame, right? Anyway, if you're looking to upgrade your PC, maybe hold back on the graphics card for a bit and do the other bits first. But yes, it started to misbehave. So we're moving on to our next title, some multiplayer, some Halo Infinite. I haven't actually played this properly in a while, but I really enjoyed this for about a year or so, like sitting down with it every single night. This is a bit of an interesting mode, actually. This is a one-shot, kill. Because I'm good at this game anyway, as I say. We're running this at 4K Ultra, no DLSS or scaling or anything in this, which is a little bit of a shame, but to be fair, you can just still turn it down and set a minimum frame rate and it will adjust the resolution on the fly for you. And it does a decent enough job, but like it's not as good as DLSS or something like that. But we're currently getting around about 150 FPS or so it's not like it really matters on this system. You don't actually have to choose between like high fidelity and high frame rate. You can definitely get both. Though as I say, I would prefer that there were some scaling technologies in this, but that's beside the point anyway. It clearly shows that this is a very, very capable system regardless of what it is that you want to play. But going into the options menu and then turning this down to 1440p should yield higher frame rates, and indeed it does. We're now looking at around about 210 FPS or so now like fully saturating this monitor with FPS. If we did want to like play as competitive possible, as I say, this monitor can actually be 1080p 360 Hz, which would make sense if you have like a dual mode display to kind of try like that. But there's not like a massive difference to the overall image quality actually, despite the lack of DLSS. The algorithm that they do use definitely does work quite well, and obviously we're now able to get a lot more fluidity while still having a very good looking game. So all in all, it's working pretty well. And as you watch this last piece of MLG Halo gameplay, actually I'm quite good at this, I realise we haven't spoken about CPU thermals, and at the moment we're currently getting around about 62 degrees whilst gaming. Obviously if you were going to be running Cinebench or anything like 100% load, then you'd be getting a higher temp. But I should say I actually haven't installed IQ on this, so I realised why the CPU cooler was slightly louder than I thought it was going to be. It's because it's going to be running probably in the standard mode rather than quiet, or tuning it down yourself. And if you're getting around about 62 degrees, you've got so much headroom. So all in all, this has been a pretty interesting system. What do you guys think of this case? I mean, for me, I would say that the full build process was ridiculously easy. It really does feel premium, solid, and I like the fact that it's doing things differently, but obviously it does come at a cost, so it's certainly not for everyone. There are much cheaper cases you could look at that would give you a great build, but if you do want something that is going to be very easy to build in, or gives you this option of obviously having something completely different with the glass, the vertical GPU, then obviously it's nice to have that option too, and the PCI Gen 5. But as I say, let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Smash the like button if you've enjoyed this, get yourself subscribed, and if you do want to check out current pricing on anything that was featured in this video, you can find it listed down below. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. We'll catch you in the next one.